Chapter 2, what is an academic paper? Definition of an academic paper. An academic paper is a written report describing original results, which should be published. From this short definition, it's clear that the paper must be qualified and written in a certain way. Academic research is meaningless unless it is published. In practice, a large number of people have struggled with the definition of valid publication, from which the Council of Biology Editor, CBE, now the Council of Science Editor, CSE, arrived at the widely accepted definition of an academic paper. An acceptable primary scientific publication must be the first disclosure containing sufficient information to enable peers first to assess observations, second to repeat experiments, and third to evaluate intellectual processes. Moreover, it must be susceptible to sensory perception, essentially permanent, available to the scientific community without restriction, and available for regular screening by one or more of the major recognized secondary services, such as currently biological abstracts, chemical abstracts, index medicus, etc. medica, bibliography of agriculture, etc. in the United States and similar services in other countries. I will explain this definition in detail. Firstly, an acceptable primary scientific publication must be the first disclosure. It is certain that new research data are often disclosed in the form of presentation at an academic conference. But the essence of the definition statement above is that effective and efficient first disclosure takes place and is achieved only when it takes a form that allows the author's peers to completely comprehend and apply that which is disclosed. Secondly, another point should be clarified. This definition provides for disclosure not just in terms of printed visual materials like printed journals, but also in non-print and non-visual forms. For example, if the publication in the form of radio recordings met the other tests provided in the definition, would also be regarded as effective publication. The same is applied to electronic journals meeting the definition of valid publication. Aimed at material posted on a website, views have varied depending on the nature of the material posted. In this kind of situation, the best way is to consult materials from professional organizations and journals in your own field. Thirdly, the publication form must be fundamentally permanent, which means that it must be available to academic community without restriction. For example, the journal is openly accessible online or to which subscriptions are available and must be made available to information retrieval services. To restate the CBE definition in simpler but not more accurate terms, primary publication is first the first publication of original research results. Second, in a form whereby peers of the author can repeat the experiments and test the conclusions. And third, in a journal or other source document readily available within the scientific community. Next, I will talk about organization of an academic paper. An academic paper is organized to meet the needs of valid publication. It is highly stylized with distinctive and clearly evident component parts. The most common labeling of the component parts in the basic sciences is introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Hence, the acronym IMRAD. I will talk about the origin and history of IMRAD. The early journals published descriptive paper, which is featured with straightforward reporting. Of course, this style could often be used in later journals, medical case reports, geological surveys, and so forth. By the end of the 19th century, the science was beginning to develop fast and in increasingly sophisticated ways. Microbiology is a typical example. With the confirmation of the germ theory of disease and microorganism study, great advances were made in both science and science reporting. At that time, many of fanatic believers in the theory of spontaneous generation focused on methodology and began to challenge it. There was necessity to describe lab experiments in exquisite detail so that experiments could be produced by some reasonably competent peers. Under such circumstances, the fundamental talent of science philosophy was the principle of experiment reproducibility, and highly structured IMRAD format was naturally established. It is known that World War II prompted the development of antibiotics like penicillin, first described by Alexander Fleming in 1929, streptomycin, 链霉素, reported in 1944, and soon after World War II, the tetracyclines, 四环素, and dozens of other effective antibiotics were produced by the crazy search for miracle drugs. As these advances were shown beyond medical research, laboratories after World War II, demands for paper publication are greatly needed. At the same time, journal editors had to be faced with great pressure to deal with journal space, who had to require manuscripts to be concisely written and well organized. In other words, journal space became so precious that verbosity or redundancy must be avoided. The IMRAD format, the simplest and most logical way to communicate research results, gradually came into wide use in research journals. The logic of IMRAD can be defined in this way. What question or problem was studied? The answer is the introduction. How was the problem studied? The answer is the methods. What were the findings? The answer is the results. What do these findings mean? The answer is a discussion. It now seems clear that the simple logic of IMRAD is really helpful for the author to organize and write the manuscripts, providing an easy roadmap for editors, referees, and ultimately readers to follow in paper reading. Whether an author is writing an article about chemistry, journalism, or economics, the IMRAD format is often the best choice. Although the IMRAD format is universally used, it is not the only format for academic papers. There are, of course, exceptions. Different journals have different requirements. To be specific, the methods section could appear at the end of papers. Results and discussion sections could be combined. The conclusion section could also appear at the end. Methods section and results section can alternate. In some papers, especially in the social science, a long literature review section could appear at the beginning of the paper. Therefore, other norms could also exist, including IRDAM, IMRADC, IMRMRMRD, ILMRAD, and so on. Since different variations of IMRAD exist, the determination of paper organization forms should depend on the instructions of your target journal and look at analogous papers published in the journal. Also, corresponding source books could make you informed. Here, I will offer you some sources. Formats of medical papers are described by Hughes, 1999, Pitt and others, 2002, Taylor, 2011, and contributors to a multi-author guide, Hall, 2013. Formats of engineering papers and reports by Michelson, 1990, and by Peer and McMurray, 2014. By the way, I have to remind you that writing books in your own discipline can be also referred to, including those in biomedical science by Ziegler, 2000. The Health Science by Long, 2010. In chemistry by Abel, Blissford, and Rossi, 2004. And in psychology by Sternberg and Sternberg, 2010. Generally, even though English is the international language of academic research, for us who are not the native speakers, the organization of an academic paper is the essential task of a paper author. Maybe this is a comfort for us.